I'm joined by Fenton and Chris. Oh.
The one question we haven't waited that's about is not an official ballot question. This other person.
Without question, financial struggles. We have some big wind farms, but even those require a lot of people to manage.
I think we're all very accessible, and it's really important for me as an elected official.
Hello and welcome to Frontier Community Access Television. I'm Mason Smith, your host for tonight on our election coverage night. It's a very special night and an important one all across the United States of America. The votes will be coming in soon. We'll be talking about that a lot later, but we also have a lot of other information we'd like to talk to you all about. We have exit polling data that we've been able to gather around Franklin County and the Union 38 district towns. We also have with us several guests tonight, including who will be talking to first tonight, State Senator Joe Comerford and State Representative Natalie Blaze. I'm also joined tonight by Fenton and Chris, who will be some of our correspondents with our guests tonight. So now we'll turn it over to them and the State Senator and State Representative.
All right. So my first question that I'd like to ask you two are, what are your top legislative priorities this year, and how do they address the biggest challenges facing our state?
I'm just going to roll with, first of all, thank you to everyone here who's paying attention tonight to this election, which is it's a historical election. And the fact that you all have invited us to be here with you tonight is amazing. So thank you for that. I also just want to state that being able to do this work alongside State Senator Joe Comerford is a privilege and an honor. We have been able to lean on each other when it comes to things like public health or transportation or infrastructure, whatever it happens to be. We were elected 6 years ago, and we were in office for my dogs are now weighing in. Sorry about this. But we were in office for one whole year before COVID hit. And so we learned what it was like to work together in a particular way in the legislature. And then COVID hit. And I have to say that it was incredible to be able to lean on this senator who represents, Joe, 57 towns?
No.
Oh, is it more than that? Is it less than that?
25.
25 cities and towns. And she has been lifted up as a leader across our Commonwealth in terms of the public health crisis that we faced when we were dealing with COVID-19. So we are very lucky to be able to support one another when it comes to our strengths. And when you asked about what is the biggest thing? Let me tell you, as someone who represents 18 communities in the 1st Franklin District, I think the first thing that we're hearing about is education. I will tell you that we have fought for increased funding for education, especially when it comes to rural schools. I was very proud to serve as the House chair of this commission that was formed to look at the very specific fiscal challenges that our rural schools are facing. And I have to tell you, it was a real eye-opener as we were talking to our colleagues about what it means when our classrooms are seeing a decrease in the number of students who are there. It doesn't matter if you have 15 students or 25 students in a classroom, you still have to have a teacher. And we've seen that those costs are really disproportionately burdened our rural schools. And so I'm really grateful to Joe for being here tonight, for being a partner in the work as we are trying to get what the recommendation was for $60 million for the rural schools, for rural school aid. We were able to get it from $1 million 6 years ago to $16 million today. It is not the $60 million that we need, but we are going to continue to fight for that. So education funding is, I think, the top priority that we are hearing from our constituents, and that is what we are working for, right? And I want to just take a minute to say, you all are in high school at Frontier, and by the way, it's an incredible school, and we work for you. That is something that you should know, and we are here for you every single day. It doesn't matter who calls us. When we pick up the phone, we want to make sure that we're working for every single individual that is calling us who may be facing some challenges with government. And that was a very extended answer to your question. And I'm going to turn it over to Joe Comerford, who is amazing.
Sister, thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm so grateful to join Representative Blais with you this evening. It's an auspicious evening for our nation, I believe. And I just want to pick up where Rep. Blais left off on education funding. What's true is that Rep. Blais chaired this statewide commission that delivered recommendations, which through her leadership, both she and I are now filing, thanks again to the work she did on the commission, we are now filing as legislation. And along with that come budget priorities. And I agree with Rep. Blais, that's our top priority because we work for people like you, as the representative said so well. It's not going to be surprising to you that we also focus on an array of other rural issues. And that's everything from how do we build housing equitably? How do we make sure our infrastructure is good? How do we have primary care physicians and pediatricians here in the region in equitable numbers? So we say the word equitable many times every day because that's what the state needs to understand, that one size fits all budget and policy doesn't fit Western Massachusetts. And the representative and I make that point again and again and again in Boston. And over the years, we've begun to see some shifts. So this year, we're both going into our fourth term, and both the representative and I are building on wins in everything from education to climate to healthcare to other rural-focused issues. And it's a real privilege to get to do this work and join Rep. Blais in serving our region, and especially this gorgeous school.
How are you supporting educational reform to improve schools and student outcomes in our area?
Oh, Rep. Blais, you're on mute.
My dogs were barking. I think we just talked about that a little bit, right? Like we have been trying to fight for educational support for all of our students. And I have to say that both Joe and I have been at Frontier, and the students and the teachers that we have interacted with have been incredible. And I'm grateful to you all for being with us on election night. This is important, right? What we're talking about tonight is important. And so when we're talking about education funding, we have been working with our colleagues from Western Massachusetts to press upon the Healy Driscoll administration what it looks like out here in Western Massachusetts. And I will say that we are very lucky to have an administration like we have right now that recognizes the very unique challenges we have here in Western Massachusetts when it comes to funding. And we've been able to lift this up as a result of students like you who have brought these issues to us. And so I just want to thank you all for having us here tonight to talk about this. And we've certainly been lifting that up in every opportunity we can, whether it's a Ways and Means hearing at Greenfield Community College, whether it's a letter to the Healy Driscoll administration, or as we're talking with the chairs of the Ways and Means committees, where we're talking about where our money goes in the Commonwealth.
And I'll just, I want to just build on what the representative said. The representative noted a letter. So Rep. Blais and I joined with other representatives in the region to write to Governor Healy in advance of her first budget in the next session. So that's called H1. We expect it will be out in January. And just like we both said earlier, we do both policy around education. So what can we change that's law right now to make our schools get a fairer shake? And then how do we fight for better sums of money that more represent the kinds of opportunities and challenges we have here? And so there are numbers of milestones that the representative and I try to maximize, right? A legislator's job is to go at problems every different way, all the time, in different manners, right? So that we can try to find the inroads and then maximize those to the benefit of our district. So right now we're asking for the governor's action as she considers her first budget in January of the next session. Then Rep. Blais will lead in the House, as she's done beautifully. I will pick up the rear in the Senate because the House always goes first. And then we'll start all over again, even as we file legislation, which we will. Both of us have several education bills that we're readying to put back in that would make a world of difference for our region. But I'll just say here that both the rep and I have been very, very clear that we have a lot to do. And I think you have a question here about accountability. We never shy away from our accountability. We take it really seriously. So I encourage you to ask that question. But really what we need, and there is nothing stronger than an informed, engaged, and active electorate. So what I would encourage in this government class, which is so wonderful that you're tuning into the election and you're calling your elected officials to talk with you, we need you to be on the move for equity, for regional equity, for fairness in education funding. We need you to come to hearings, make your voices heard, support your superintendent and school committee, who are excellent representatives. You know, that's going to be what's going to make the difference here. Perfectly fine people go to Boston, and you've been served. The district has been served by them before us, right? We're on their shoulders now. But the only good stuff that happens in Boston, and this is true for democracy writ large, is when people tell us how to serve best. And that's the representative was talking about. Stories, when you tell us stories, when you give us ideas, and then you hold us accountable and you hold the legislature accountable. That's the sweet spot. That's the magic of democracy. Since tonight is all about democracy, it's important that we acknowledge that people are at the center of it, and any good thing is because of you.
Thank you, Senator Comerford.
Thank you. And carrying on with accountability, I think our last question is, what actions do you take to hold yourself accountable to your promises and priorities?
Oh, it's a beautiful question. And I am lucky enough to have been in Frontier classrooms talking with students about what's important to you. I am so glad to have partnered with Senator Comerford on legislation that was born from classrooms at Frontier. And that's what this is about, right? We touched on this before, but you know, when we pick up the phone and we're talking about accountability, we want to make sure that government works for you. It doesn't matter what political party you're affiliated with. We don't ask that question when we pick up the phone. It is more important to, I think, both of us that we just want to make sure that government is working for the people that we serve. And to the extent that we can make government work better, we're going to do that. And again, we were very lucky to work alongside your peers to introduce legislation around menstrual products and the ingredients that are contained on the boxes of things that we put in our bodies. We know what we're putting into our bodies every single day when it comes to food. It was brought to our attention that it was California and New York have passed legislation around menstrual products and the ingredients that are put into menstrual products. We are working hard to pass this legislation that was brought to us by your peers. And that is an incredible thing. And I think it's important for you all to know, even if you are not 18, if you can't vote, we are still here for you. That is not what we are here for. We want to hear from all of you about your incredible ideas and make sure that we are representing all of you. And so we were lucky enough to be able to introduce this legislation that was brought to us by your peers. We're still working to get that through. But it is something that I think it's important to say that the very best ideas are brought to us by young people like yourselves.
I completely agree with the representative. And let's just be clear, she led on that bill. I got to join her, and it did come right from your classrooms, which is so exciting. And actually, it's doing very well, right? It's reported to Ways and Means because of the advocacy from students at Frontier and other places, and because of the reps' leadership. I wanted just to also talk about other ways that we hold ourselves accountable. So both the rep and I do numbers of things in similar ways, and some things that are different, but which is good, right? Because we learn from each other. But we both publish newsletters, which are pretty honest accountings of where we've won and where we've failed, because we believe, right, that voters should know exactly what we're doing on their behalf. We both hold town halls. We both go to events like these a lot, which is really good, because we want to show up in spaces that are defined by constituents and then have to answer to you. We both are on social media. And I think we think of all these communication tools, not as like opportunities for Natalie and Joe to congratulate ourselves, but they are really opportunities for accountability and even maybe more importantly, voter education, because we want constituents to be smarter than we are about the government process, because when you're smart, right, you are effective. And so we do numbers of things like this. We also hold a lot of forums inside of Boston and here in the district, where we bring officials from the administration, or we bring experts on issues, both to make ourselves smarter, but also to raise up issues that we believe need greater attention on the part of the legislature. And in doing that, it's another way to tell constituents, hey, this is what we're doing. And if you don't like what we're doing, tell us. And if you like what we're doing, join us, because we're going to be stronger together. And so there's, it's a combo of communication and engagement that I think we both strive for. And that's part of the way that we're transparent, and we're accountable to you. And as Representative said, you also tell us what bills we should file, and we do that, right? So both of the bills that we carry numbers of bills every session. Many of them, virtually all of them sometimes, are just from the district. And the just is meaning purely from the district. And that's when people say, hey, fix this, Joe, or fix this, Natalie, or I have a problem and it's not just about me, it's about a broken system. We take those on and we create legislation, as the representative did around menstrual products. And That's another way that we're accountable to you. And then we're also accountable in the kind of money and resources we bring home and the statewide bills that we support or don't support, right? Both the representative and I support bills that are important to our region, but we also block bad stuff, stuff that would hurt us, and we don't allow it to get further, than perhaps a threatened coming to the floor, unless it works for our district. So those are the ways, and we try to tell you all about it.
And if I could just take a second, like Joe and I are available in our grocery stores, at the Franklin County Fairgrounds, all of these events, and just in our daily lives, people see us. And it's important to know that when you see us, even as as high school people, you can talk to us about what's on your mind. And we hope that you do that. That is really incredibly important because we work for you. So I just want to flag that too, that as we're shopping for our raspberries or bananas or bread or whatever it happens to be, we're working for you still.
I love that. I call them the frozen aisle conversations.
Yes, it happens.
Yes.
Yeah, and we both have office hours, I should say. We both have office hours. And that's another way that we are accountable, right? Because we have to go to Boston numbers of days every week. It varies. But we also want to be present fully, as Natalie is saying, in the district. And we do that through these different ways.
Yes, well, we'd like to thank you both so much for your time. We know it's a very busy night for both of you, and so we wish you both the best of luck in managing that time well. So thank you both very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
And we will be right back with some more information about election night after a quick break. Access Television special coverage of tonight's national election. Before we look at some of our exit polling, we are going to turn it over to Chris, who's going to be talking about Frontier's mock election that we held just last week with over 500 participants from the student population. So take it away, Chris.
Thank you, Mason. I would like to discuss both the turnout and results that happened here. I think this is very interesting here. That is a lot closer than both 2020 and 2016, where Trump failed to take around 30% of the vote. Here he's receiving around 40%. The trend continues for Senator, where John Deaton also received around 40% of the vote. But the trend fails here where independent Cornelia Shea failed to receive a lot of the vote. This is probably due to James McGovern's namesake around here. So member of the Congress, so that's about, it's displayed twice. So I would like to go to the most important issues. Reproductive rights takes the lead, which is not a surprise. Economy is second, and gun violence is third. Education only received around 3.5%, which is shocking. And I would like to take it down to some of the ballot questions. Question 1, state auditor's authority to audit the legislator. Mostly not sure. I'm assuming it's because most people don't know what it meant. Question 2, elimination of the MCAS, which is the most talked about one here, around here. And on the form where people voted, it was posed as sort of confusing. So when you see 67% no, that's going to mean that most people did vote to eliminate the MCAS as a high school requirement. Yes, meaning they did not want to remove the MCAS. Question 3, Uber and Lyft unionization. This is for drivers who work with Uber, Lyft, and other places to be able to unionize since they are not allowed to currently. It received around 59%, 60% of the vote, and yeah, question 4. Psychedelic substances. This is a widely talked about subject currently, and it seems that students are very mixed on the topic of psychedelic drugs. Yes, one with a plurality of around 48%, but there were many not sures and many more no's. Question 5. Minimum wage for tipped workers. Currently in Massachusetts, tipped workers earn a much lower wage than that of non-tipped workers. Many think that they do not have the ability to get by due to this, therefore there is a ballot question. Students seem to agree with this, question. Over here. TV media coverage and social media coverage affecting the vote of your preferred vote. 60% said yes, 40% said no. This is very interesting to me because there is a lot of distrust, particularly among young people, within media and social media for election purposes, politics. Many seem to think of, Fox as being far right, CNN being far left. There's a lot of disappointment in the media, and I think it's surprising that many would affect this. Election in a more negative light. 75% of students in Frontier have said yes, that the election has been seen in a more negative light. Candidate choice the same as your parents, guardians, and or family members. 58% of students said yes, 14% said no, and many said not sure. I think this is very interesting because we live in a very particularly left-leaning area electorally, and I think this corresponds pretty normally with the presidential results and the senatorial results. And that's all the data we have here for right now.
Hello and welcome back to Frontier Community Access Television special election night coverage. We're joined now by a Whately Select Board member. I gotta get your name right, I did write it down. Joyce Palmer Fortune. So we're very pleased to have you here tonight. We've had plenty of very interesting guests, and of course I'm sure that you'll prove to be just as interesting.
Well, I'll try to live up to expectations. Thank you.
Of course. And so Finton and I have a couple questions that we've written down for you about election and your own position in the Select Board as well. So.
Sure.
All right. So my first question is, what are the top priorities of the Select Board this year? And how will you address these? How will you address the current needs of our town?
Oh, well, there's kind of a few big projects going on in town. There's one that's been going on for quite some time. The Whately Center School is an unused building at this point, and we need to figure out what we're going to do with it. And some community has gotten together to form a committee to try and find grants to do things like fix the roof. Or do a feasibility study to find out what it seems reasonable could really be done with it, and what amount of money would it take to invest in it to do that. So that's one big project that's been going on for quite some time. Another thing going on in Whately is the Public Works, the Highway Department building is really old and starting to get borderline, like, I don't want to say unsafe, but at some point in the foreseeable future it really will be. It's also already kind of too small for trucks that are made today, so we're looking at coming up with a new highway department building. But you know, we don't know where it should go, we don't know how much it will cost, and what we should be aiming for. So there's a committee that's studying that now and coming up with some options for us. Of course, a big thing for all three towns is looking for a home for senior center / community center. And that's something that I'm more directly involved in because I'm also on the Board of Oversight for the South County Senior Center. And so that's one other big thing. Of course, every year, coming up with a budget to fund our schools, to fund our services, to pay for our hardworking employees, and to be able to give people living wages. Those are all really important things that all the towns are trying to do. There are many other projects going on in Whately, but those were the first three that came to the top of my mind.
Well, thank you. And sticking with some plans that you might have for the surrounding area, specifically what improvements to local infrastructure like roads, parks, and public facilities are currently in the works for you on the Whately Select Board?
Oh, okay. Well, most of them are right now are in the planning stage, like the highway department. That would be definitely an improvement in infrastructure. And reuse of the center school building, that would definitely come under infrastructure. The senior center, we don't know where it will be, but that may also be a project where it's improving some infrastructure, but we don't know the site yet. It could be in Whately, could be in Deerfield, could be someplace we haven't thought of yet. But we've really focused now on two sites in Whately and Deerfield. We've done a lot with Hurley Park in the last few years, and you may have noticed that if you're in any of the sports, that they now have handicap and also non-handicap restrooms there. Those got cleaned up and redone. There's any number of things they've done with the fences and the dugouts and so on. So there's been a lot in the last few years at Hurley Park. And there was also some improvements in the town offices that are recently finished. They redid some of the space, reconfigured it so that people could work more efficiently and have kind of the proper kind of storage and access to things that they need. And we get one more, we also managed to somehow get one more meeting room out of it, which is nice because we were kind of scheduling meetings right on top of each other in that space.
And the next question, which ties into community, is how does the Select Board ensure residents are informed about and engaged in decisions that impact the town of Whately?
Oh, that's a really good question because sometimes we struggle with that. You know, I mean, there are legal requirements to post agendas and so on. But I think the average citizen does not look at all the posted agendas to see if a topic that's on an upcoming meeting is something they're really interested in. So for things that are really important, we try to do some kind of outreach. One way to do it is to call a forum. We did that for a couple of times for the senior center. We had a forum in Whately about changing the zip code, or unifying the zip code, I should say. That was one that was lots of outreach done through the town newsletter and through telephone calls, the Connect CTY telephone calls. And we try to make our select board meetings entertaining so that people can watch. And those are recorded, and there are people who watch the recordings. And thank you, FCAP, for helping us out with that. That's so sometimes people say, hey, I saw that meeting the other day, and I wanted to tell you such and such. So those, I think, are the main ways. There was you said about infrastructure, and I didn't say anything about roads. So if I can go back one, we are always in all three towns, I'm sure you're seeing this, working on culverts, working on water management. And there's a number of culverts that are kind of in the process of getting funding to be replaced, and there are some others where we're working on getting the funding. We've got one bridge that's down to one lane, so we're not too bad off. I understand our neighbors in Deerfield, you have a bridge that's completely out, and it's a really vital bridge. So best of luck getting that through funding as quickly as possible. But everybody's got roads and culverts. That's kind of continuously going on in the background in all the towns.
And so to stick with you were talking about the accessibility of the select board. And I mean, we've had representatives from, we've had people come in that are in the state legislature, and we also talked to House Representative Jim McGovern as well, which we will be showing soon.
Good.
Yes, it was a very interesting talk, and I've always enjoyed talking to him. But why do you think, and this is, I mean, your own opinion as a member of the select board, a lot of people pay more attention, of course, to higher levels of government. Why do you think it's important for people to pay attention, equal amounts of attention, maybe even more, to local government?
That's a really good question. I think the people who do pay attention are often thinking about, hey, this is going to affect my local tax bill. And that's a fact of life. We need to raise a lot of our money locally, and I think that's valid. It's completely valid for that to be a motivation for people to be involved. I don't think it's the only motivation, because I think being at the table, if we have more people kind of at the table sharing their ideas, we're going to come up with better solutions to problems. That's, I think, been shown again and again and again. And having people with different kinds of knowledge at the table, that also, I think, makes a big difference. So I'm trying to think of a good example. When I meet people who ask questions about, hey, why do we do something this way? The next question in my mind is, what committee can I get this person signed up for? Because I think we need people who actually care about what's going on locally. And it affects our schools. Because it affects our schools, it affects our children. It affects, I mean, I don't have children in Frontier anymore, but I did. I had 2 sons who graduated from Frontier who are doing really awesomely now. But my neighbors have kids that are in the schools. I don't want to live in a place where my neighbors' kids don't have a good place to go to school. Yeah. And I want to still keep it affordable for people who may be now on limited income. And at some point in the next 10 years, I'm going to retire. I'll be one of those people on a fixed income. So we've got kind of a job to do, and we really need everybody to be pulling in the same direction to get it done right.
Yeah, and speaking of unifying everyone, that's been a big message in this election year, especially when it comes to a broader goal of climate change, and that has been something that a lot of people have been talking about. The only way we're going to really progress in that respect is by everyone doing what their part in the whole struggle. And so for you as a member of the select board, how is the select board addressing environmental issues and sustainability issues, such as waste management, green spaces, and also renewable energy in Whately?
Really good question. I think that was actually one of my motivating factors for running in the first place, way back when I first ran for select board, was I really didn't see anybody pressing the schools to get solar panels, the town to get solar panels, for us to go for energy efficiency. So I ran for select board. My husband was on the school committee for a while, and one of the things they did on the school committee was they said, let's do these energy audits. Let's get funding to do these improvements to increase, because energy efficiency is what they call low-hanging fruit. It brings down both your energy cost and fewer greenhouse gases emitted. When they were starting to allow large solar arrays in Massachusetts, this was maybe 2009-ish, they changed the tax law so that you wouldn't have to pay a huge upfront tax if you were going to put in solar arrays. And what you had to do instead was we had to negotiate a pilot agreement because that upfront payment was actually taxes, an excise tax on the value of the property. I know this is like getting really arcane, right?
That's all right.
But it meant that companies had this barrier. So the towns had the option to flatten that out, have them pay a more constant tax over the lifetime of those solar panels, rather than paying something huge up front. And so I was on the team that helped negotiate the first pilot for a solar farm in the state of Massachusetts. And since then, things have changed, and today we actually get better pilot agreements than that first one. But the whole idea was to, hey, let's lower this barrier, and let's get the town some money that's steady over a longer period of time. So we have this kind of steady income rather than just, oh, here's this big bunch of money, and then it's gone the next year. We're putting solar panels on the roof of our town hall now. That was through a grant that our assistant town administrator for community development got for us. And one of the reasons we got that whole position was we wanted to be able to apply for and receive more of the grants that are available for sustainable and renewable energy. There's on Thursday this week, there's going to actually be a kickoff meeting for a grant we just got on bee pollinator habitat and how do we make our town friendly for bee pollinators. So, I mean, that's something they're under threat due to climate change, and that's something we're doing. There's probably some things I'm forgetting, but as you could tell, this is like something that gets me going.
Yeah. And that's why you like to do it.
Yes, exactly. That's one of the reasons I like to. It's kind of like when you're in the room, it makes a big difference when you're in the room and you bring that perspective. I'm an electrical engineer who teaches physics, and I understand a lot about renewable energy technology. I'm not afraid of it, and I understand it. And I remember people coming with various questions. I remember someone coming to the first solar farm hearing, and they were saying, well, what's going to happen if we have this solar farm? As if something bad was going to happen. I said, well, there'll be a little bit less coal being burnt down at the coal plant. There'll be less mercury in the air. Maybe fewer kids getting birth defects. A lot of kids not going to get asthma because we don't have to burn as much hydrocarbons. We're going to have cleaner air, and we're going to have less CO2. And they were like, yeah, but what's the bad part? And there's not a bad part. There's not really a bad part to that. Some people don't like the way they look. So, surround it with trees. But just to be there to be able to answer a question like that was, I think, kind of meaningful. I'm trying to think of other places where just insisting that we do the environmentally correct thing if the cost was only this much more. Most of the time, though, doing the environmentally correct thing actually saves you money in the long run. And towns are the perfect place to be looking for savings in the long run, right? Because then that's kind of protecting your future taxes, that we won't have to pay as much in the future if we just spend a little bit today.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate you coming out here.
Thank you all for doing this. I think this is such a great program, and thank you, Mr. Murphy.
Yes, Mr. Murphy behind all of this tonight. Shout out to him. He's been doing a great job along with all the rest of our crew backstage. So thank you for reminding us to give them the credit that they deserve. But thank you again for coming to join us. And when we come back, we will be having the interview that we recorded with Jim McGovern. So we will take a quick break, and when we come back, you will get to see that interview. You're watching Frontier Community Access Television. All right. So we were hoping to ask you a few questions about the election tonight and what's going on with that. So for you personally, you're running for your office again as a representative of the 2nd District in Massachusetts for the House of Representatives. How does that feel for you to be on the ballot in such a pivotal year?
Well, look, it's the highest honor of my life to have served the people of the 2nd Congressional District in Congress, and I want to I have a lot more that I want to do, and so it's exciting to be on the ballot, and I'm out here as we speak, and I'm right now in Worcester, holding signs and trying to get every vote I can get. So this is democracy in action.
And so you said there's a lot more that you want to do. So I was going to ask, what specifically has led you to run for re-election again?
Well, there are a lot of issues I care deeply about. I mean, ranging from combating climate change to ending hunger in this country. I represent a lot of rural areas, a lot of farms, especially out in the western part of the state. And I want the federal government to recognize that it's important not just to support big, gigantic, mega farms. It's important to support our small and medium-sized farms. I want to fight for women's reproductive rights. I want to fight for the LGBTQ plus community, which has come under attack by a lot of Republicans and by Trump in particular. And I want to fight for our democracy and our Constitution. I want to fight for the middle class to even the playing field with our tax policy. I mean, there's something wrong when teachers and farmers and firefighters pay a higher tax rate than big corporations or multi-billionaires or people like Elon Musk. So, I mean, I'm about this and about strengthening the middle class and helping people get into the middle class.
And so I believe you mentioned you represent a lot of rural areas. A question that has been asked of me about you is there's a lot of teachers here in the western part of the district that you represent that have a lot of their contracts up for negotiation in this coming year. And the question that I've been asked a lot, which I want to pose to you now, is what is the future likelihood in the next session of Congress that rural aid or other kinds of federal aid will be passed to compensate teachers for the kind of work that they do here in Massachusetts?
Well, look, we would, depending on whether we win the Congress back and whether we have a working majority, I want to funnel more federal aid to states to help with education and to have states utilize it as they see fit, whether it's for teacher compensation or for upgrading our infrastructure. But the primary fund for from the state, but we want to complement with us, and I'm all for that.
All right. And so you mentioned the control of the House and the Senate as well. There's a lot that's up in the air tonight beyond the presidency. So how are you feeling about the potential shift in control of the House and the Senate?
So I feel good. We haven't got any results yet, but I feel good because I believe the choices are clear. And if you care about investment in education, I don't know how you can support Trump or Republicans in Congress because they've been about cutting funding for education. And nothing but for public education in particular. And so I don't know how it will turn out, but if the Democrats make control of the Senate, if we gain control of the House, and if Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, who, by the way, former chief, and so is his wife, if they win, thank you. If they win, I need to be sure that they care about teachers and public school teachers in particular.
Yeah, and so you mentioned some of your different priorities before when if you can get back into your currently elected position. Do you think that your priorities would change depending on who has control of the House and the Senate?
Look at it. It needs government to work. And there was a time when Democrats and Republicans worked together. Thank you. I do. Not Yahoo, though. Sorry. Anyway, I'm just talking to people here.
Oh, it's all right.
But yeah, no, I I think we need a working majority in both the House and the Senate to be able to get stuff done.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you talked about some of the things that you represented a little bit more locally and also on the federal level, different things like that. What do you think, if you had to name one, what would be the most important issue facing our country today?
Look, I think the most important issue is that can make that families can support, their kids, and people can live a decent life and be able to have food that they can afford and a livable wage and be able to, it's just living life in a way that you're not constantly under siege. So I strengthen working families is where, where my focus is. But along with that means protecting the rights of families too, right? The rights of women's reproductive rights, the rights of the LGBTQ community, which again are coming back by the Republicans and by Donald Trump. Families come in all shapes and sizes and look different. We have to support all families, get by, and be able to have a life, but to respect their rights as well. And so that's what I'm dedicated to.
Yeah, and so with Harris and her campaign trail that she's been on for the past several weeks, I assume that you've been watching it closely as the rest of us have. Is there anything that you feel specifically maybe concerned about? I know you have confidence in her, but is there anything that you think she could have done in a better way to secure more votes?
Look, this has been a relatively short campaign for her, and she's run a flawless campaign. She's been and talked about issues, and she talked about not only what she's against, but more importantly, what she's for. She has a plan for small businesses, she has a plan to go for prescription drug prices, she has a plan to help alleviate student debt, she has a plan for everything. And contrast that with her opponent, who has a plan for nothing, but he complains about everything.
And so with this election and how divisive it's been, you talked about the other candidate, Mr. Donald Trump. He's made all kinds of claims about election fraud and the like. We have to face an issue of possible violence that could happen. Do you think that there's a strong likelihood that we could see violence happening as a result of this election? Well, I'll pose the question to you again, Mr. McGovern. What likelihood do you think that there is going to be violence after this election result comes in?
Well, I certainly hope not. And I say that as the last person on the House floor on January 6th, when Trump ordered Bob to attack the Capitol for return of freedom. So I saw that violence. 140 officers were injured that day. People were traumatized. The nation was traumatized. I hope that, and it's important. Law enforcement is prepared for anything. My hope is that there'll be no violence. Violence is a solvent. There is no place for violence in our politics, and wherever we see.
All right. Well, the last question that I have for you is something a bit more current that has happened with this election. The recent polls that have come out of Iowa, and the change that we've seen in that. What are your thoughts on Harris's now perceived lead in Iowa through those recent polls?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if she's going to win Iowa, but I think that Iowa Des Moines Register poll is instructive to women, especially independent, unenrolled women, are breaking her way, largely around the issue of reproductive rights and reproductive freedom. Mm-hmm. Women don't want to be treated as second-class citizens, and they want Donald Trump to protect whether they like it or not. What they want is respect. And I believe that are going to save the country. And it will be bright.
All right. Well, we'd like to thank you very much for the time that you've spent with us today, Mr. McGovern. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We hope that.
I hope to see you in person. I hope to see you guys in person.
Yes,
All the
I hope so too, and hope that all goes well with your campaign tonight.
Thanks.
Community Access Television. Definitely a very interesting talk that we had with House of Representatives Representative James P. McGovern. It's my second time meeting him, actually. I got to meet him over the summer, which was very interesting. And now we're going to look at some of the exit polling that we did. Some volunteers from the AP government class and around the School for Frontier went to different polling stations in the four-county area. And so we have all of these different graphs that we're going to be looking at. So if we can move forward to the presidential election one. So here you can see overwhelmingly, as you might expect, with Massachusetts, Kamala Harris winning in a very big margin here, 76, almost 77%, and marginal gains for some of the third-party candidates, Jill Stein with the Green Rainbow Party, and I believe that's the, oh no, rather not say. There's plenty of people with all of the questions after the pollings. They want to keep their privacy, and you can see that a lot. But Donald Trump on the far side, you can see with 15%. So he's getting close to a sizable chunk of the pie right now. And if we move forward to the Senate, we can see something similar where we have a similar amount for the Democrats in the Senate. Elizabeth Warren, the candidate incumbent right now, and John Deaton, the Republican. He's getting around 20% right now, it looks like. And a reminder that this is just in the Franklin County area. Most of these results actually coming from Conway. So not necessarily a very accurate polling of the whole area on an even slate. But if we move forward here for the state Senate, Paul Mark, an independent running in this race, a lot of people, this is the interesting thing to me, no vote. And so when you get to a local level, as we were talking to with our last guest, a lot of people pay less attention to a lot of the issues that are happening and where certain candidates stand. And so sometimes people will go and they'll vote for whoever is in their own party. For example, if you're a Democrat and you just see that someone is labeled as a Democrat, you might just go ahead and vote for them, or an independent in Paul Mark's case. But with some other people, the information and where that candidate stands is more important to them, and they value that over the party affiliation. And so that's where you're going to see a lot of the no vote here. And so moving forward to the representatives graph. For District 2, which is the district that Franklin County is a part of, very overwhelming, the incumbent, Jim McGovern, who you just saw. We had an interview with him, having some pretty serious support in our area, as opposed to Cornelia Shea, an independent, who barely getting over 10% of the vote right now, and still no vote for just about the same margin that is going for Cornelia Shea. And if we go back a minute here for the count of the state Senate for Franklin County, you can see some similar things that we were talking about with the state Senate in the previous one. Again, a lot of no vote that's happening. But you can't sit here and say, you can say that Massachusetts is a blue state, we're in a blue region as well, but there's people who have all different kinds of opinions across the whole United States, especially here in Western Mass, where we have all different kinds of education facilities. And so if we move forward to the other representative for District 1, which also encompasses some areas here, Richard Neal, registered as a Democrat here, taking just about 75% of the vote. Again, no vote with a big margin of the people that we were able to poll. And now moving away from the actual elections themselves, these are some really interesting graphs here. Do you feel this election was presented in a more negative light than previous elections? There's been a lot of stuff on social media about this election, some pressuring, it seems to be, from different candidates' actual social media accounts. And so the overwhelming majority, 85%, of the people that we polled coming out of the ballot is they said yes. It was portrayed in a very negative light. 15% of people disagreeing with that, of course, but you see this kind of overwhelming majority. You got to start thinking about, why are we having these elections that are, fueling our democracy here in America? Why are they being portrayed in such a negative way? And we will, I think, have a deeper discussion about that when we have and dive deeper into election fraud. And if we move forward to question 1 here. So there was 5 questions, which Chris talked about earlier with the student mock election that we had here at Frontier. Question 1, should the auditor oversee the legislature? And now something that I remember Chris mentioning, a lot of the students had a lot of questions about what a state auditor is. At this point, with people who are actually able to vote and registered to vote, probably should know what a state auditor is. And so you can see that they have just above 50%, 57% voting yes on this, that they do think that a state auditor should be able to audit the legislature. And still a decent amount of people not having any vote at all, not filling out that question on the ballot. And if we move forward to question 2 here, eliminating the MCAS graduation requirement. And this has been a very divisive issue, I know, in Frontier and, with a lot of teachers as well. A lot of conversations have been had about this. But it seems as though with the people that we polled, again, coming mostly from Conway, just over 60% of people saying that yes, it should be eliminated as a graduation requirement. And there's much more people that voted no than no vote at all. But the thing that a lot of people have been disagreeing about is some other parts of this law and what would be the replacement as a graduation requirement. Because a lot of people can agree the MCAS, since it's a standardized test, there are things that have been proven for people that there are people that aren't very good at test taking, and that can affect them negatively and disproportionately. But what is going to replace the MCAS if we get rid of it as a graduation requirement for high school? And so what this law proposes is something to a state standard, and not a lot of people are in quite a lot of agreement on what that would be, and it would be left up to the districts for the most part. And that's where a lot of people, you'll see a lot of people, if you talk to them who voted no on this, that's where they're going to be standing a lot. So if you move forward to question 3, this is no surprise here. Big majority, for just about a supermajority, voting yes for rideshare drivers being able to unionize. And now this just gives them the option to unionize. It doesn't force them to do anything. But in a state such as Massachusetts, which is known to be very blue, this is no surprise to see that people are supporting labor unions and unionization. And moving forward, this was a very divisive question, I know, for a lot of the students here. And again, a very long law, a lot to read through if you really want to dive into the letter of it. But right now, it seems as though this will be getting passed, the legalizing of certain psychedelic drugs. Just 52% saying yes. Meanwhile, it looks like we got a glare. 43%, thank you, Tyler, 43% saying no on it. And again, several people have no vote at all. And this has been something that with the legalization of marijuana in Massachusetts and in other states as well on the rise, this idea of legalizing other drugs is something that's pretty touchy for a lot of people. The drugs that they're talking about are from different plants and also mushrooms as well. And so these plants and the effects that they have, for the most part, have been proven to fight anxiety and depression. And so a lot of people who are voting yes are going to be focusing on that. That's what they thought about when they were voting for this. But also, on the other side of the argument, the people who said, no, I don't think we should legalize this. There is a part of that law that a lot of people have been upset about, which allows a 12-foot by 12-foot square of these potentially legalized substances to be grown personally by people. I believe with their own doctor's permission, but there's a lot of gray area there, and people worried about a potential for a black market of these drugs. So if you move forward to the last question, the minimum wage for tipped workers. Now this seems, which there's a lot we can dive into with this because it's a complicated issue. 60% voting no, 33% voting yes. And again, a lot of people not sure. And that very well could be a consequence of just not quite knowing exactly what all of it means, which for a lot of people can be a safe option. But the minimum wage for tip workers, it would put into place a plan for over the next several years to increase the wage of tip workers to the state minimum wage, which I believe is $15.50 an hour. And it also, then this is the clause of it that has got people, a lot of people evidently saying no to it. It would also make tip pools, I believe, mandatory, or at least more prevalent in these tipped workers' workplaces. And what a tip pool is you take all of the tips that all of these workers have earned over a shift, and you split them out evenly among the tip workers and non-tipped workers. And so a lot of the arguments for people who actually work a tip job is with this added wage bonus and having a higher wage, people will be inclined to tip less for them, eventually leading to them earning less money. So while on the surface it might seem to be beneficial, there's a lot of gray area that can be talked about with this. And now we move on to something that's a little bit more opinion-based, TV and social media influence. As we said before, with the negative polling, if we could go back to that for a moment, if you felt that that this election was presented in a more negative light. As you can see, we already talked about it. A lot of people felt very strongly about this, that it was presented in a negative way. And if we go to the social media and TV specifically, here, did it have an influence on them? It seems to be the other way around. A lot of people felt that it seems to be about 2/3 said, no, TV and social media didn't affect my choices. And then 1/3 said otherwise. This is interesting to think about because they're saying at one point it is presenting the election to them in a negative way, in a certain way, but then it's also not affecting their actual vote. So to what extent does social media and media in general have on our own conscience and our own beliefs? And this can be touched on when we talk about what issues are very important. Now, there's a lot of issues that are very important to the United States, and you can see by the many colors here, there's a wide array that people deem to be the most important. But it seems to be that the top one for voters here that we were able to poll mostly in Conway was reproductive rights and healthcare. And that makes a lot of sense when you, again, take into consideration the state that we're in and a lot of the representatives that we've talked to tonight and the emphasis that they've put on that issue specifically. Coming in right after that is climate change and the environment. Again, makes a lot of sense with what the representatives have said, and the economy. Now, the economy is a very interesting issue in this election where you have a lot of representatives more on the local level, the ones that we talked to tonight, recognizing the economy needs to be improved and proposing ways to do it. Whereas on the national level, it definitely has been a more Republican issue that they've talked about a lot more. And of course, you can see some other things listed here: immigration, civil rights, gun violence, foreign policy, and education. And so a lot of people having a lot of different opinions on what is most important to our country right now. And we're going to be talking about what is going to end up being some really pivotal issues in the coming hours of the night and the coming days and weeks to follow in this election. And we're going to take a quick break after, yes, we're going to take a quick break after this. And when we come back, we will have another interview coming in, but we have one more. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm being told we don't have one more. That's my bad. All right, so we will take a break, and when we come back, we will have another interview coming in with a select board member from Deerfield. So stay tuned. We'll be back. You're watching Frontier Community Access Television.
Here we will be interviewing Trevor McDaniel, Deerfield board member. And Trevor, what are the top priorities for the select board this year, and how will these address the current needs of our town?
Well, thank you for having me tonight. It's always nice to be back here on election night for your interview. So we have a lot of things coming up this year. We've just passed the at annual town meeting a funding for our new town hall. So we've been in the town hall, which is the old elementary school, for years. Building that doesn't serve the town hall very well. So we've secured, thanks to Jim McGovern, $4 million. Jim McGovern and all the other reps have helped us. We've secured $4 million earmark for moving our town hall into the 1888 building, which was the original elementary school years ago. So we're going to remodel that, along with money from our CPA, which is money everybody puts forward in their taxes. Small amount of money of their taxes go each year, and it funds historical, open space, different programs like that, and we'll be using that money along with the earmark to remodel the building and put an addition on. So that'll be a big project. We're finishing up a lot this year. We finished our sewer project. We had a $22 million sewer project in South Deerfield down on the river. That was a 4 or 5 year project that is just completed. And then we are in the midst of redoing the Leary lot downtown. That's getting close to finished. The library's under construction, so we've had a lot happening in the last few years. So we're kind of finishing up a lot of those projects and starting on the town hall. Quite a few other things going on too. So,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Take it over to Pitt.
Thank you. So second question is, what improvements to local infrastructure like roads, parks, and public facilities are currently in the works?
Yes, so well, the parking lot I just mentioned in Leary Lot, that is a huge thing for the center of Deerfield. We don't have much parking downtown. We're really not supposed to be parking on Sugarloaf Street and Park Street because it's state-owned highway from years ago. So this will open up great parking in the center of town for businesses. If you want to go to a restaurant, I was down last Friday night, you couldn't really find a parking spot. So once this is open, we'll have all kinds of parking behind Elm Street. We'll also have a phase 3 charging and a phase 2 charging. We got a $2 million grant from the federal government to help us with that. So that will draw in a lot of people looking to charge their EV cars. They'll be able to park there, shop, or go to a restaurant. So that's a huge thing we worked on for a lot of years. We used ARPA money for that and the grant we got from the federal government. So that was all non-taxable local tax money to do that project. That was exciting. We just paved the sidewalks up and down North Main Street, and we're hoping to take over, do some South Main Street. We got the state to do Sugarloaf. Those sidewalks were in bad shape. So those are done, and we have more to go. We're waiting for the library project and the work on some of North Main Street before we tackle that. So there's been a lot of good projects this year going on with that kind of thing. We're still looking at parks. We had hoped to build a park next to Frontier here for soccer fields, but that we had some wetland issues there, so we couldn't build there. But we're working on a couple other ideas to try and get some more ball fields in town.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Now over to Chris.
How is the select board addressing environmental sustainability issues such as waste management, green spaces, and renewable energy?
Yeah, great question. So we really hate to go back to the Leary lot again, but what we did with that project, because this town suffered some major flooding last summer. We had 8 inches of rain in about 45 minutes in Old Deerfield, and it wiped out a lot of our roads. We had $4 million worth of roads that had gotten wiped out. That's half of our budget in a year, so we couldn't ever do that on our own. We got help from the state. So over the last few years, maybe 10 years, we've been really focusing on sustainability and green infrastructure building. So whatever we do, we have an eye towards making sure our infrastructure can handle these storms that are coming. They're coming faster, and we get more rain in a short amount of time. So on the Leary lot, instead of putting in a lot of drainage, we put in a retention. So all the pavement in there is pervious, so when it rains, the water can go through the asphalt. And we dug down several feet and built a retention kind of area underneath the ground, so all that water that falls can just stay there and then slowly trickle into the ground to replenish the water, and not just run off into the streets, because we get a lot of runoff, and trying to manage that. We've put a lot of tree filters in, tree box filters. You'll see in different areas where we'll put a tree and tie it into the drainage in the road, so we'll take the storm water, it filters the water and filters the bad stuff that's been on the road, and waters the tree. So it's kind of a nice way to kind of manage water runoff and also get some green infrastructure into town. So whatever we do in town, whatever we're working on, we're looking to sustainability. We've also worked heavily with the state on the MVP grant, which is the municipal preparedness grants, so that we can get funding from the state for engineering and projects that we're working on. So we're always trying to pull money from the state to match up with our funds and get these projects done.
Well, thank you, Trevor. Back to Fitton for our last question.
So our last question is, what long-term challenges do you foresee for Deerfield, and how do you plan to address them?
Yeah, so there's a lot. It's never enough money for education, for all the projects that we need to do in town. It's very difficult to run a town. It seems to get harder and harder each year. There's not enough money. We're always, you're raising taxes on people with, income that's stagnant. They don't have the ability, they're not working anymore. They don't have the ability to keep raising taxes for all these projects. So we focus heavily on working with our state and local government to try and find grant programs. And we work with FERCOG, helps us a ton of looking to the state, looking to the federal governments to try and pair different projects we're doing to try and get funding into the state. We've been looking at growth, and we're looking at, we need housing and we need more business. So over the last few years, we've brought a lot of businesses to town. There's tree houses opened up, and we've had other manufacturings that have filled up some of our industrial areas. So we're looking to grow the town, but in a smart way, so we can pair residential with industrial and commercial, try to raise the tax from business instead of just from residents. So it's a struggle. It's very hard to run the town and manage a lot of it. 70% of our budget goes to education. The rest of the town, police, everything else is on the last 30%, and it's very difficult. But we love it. It's a challenge, but I'm glad you guys are doing this. We hope to have you involved in local government.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for coming on, Trevor McDaniel. Now we'll be taking a look to our past from previous Frontier election coverages. Thank you.
The one question we have in Whately that's not on anybody else's ballot is not an official ballot question. It's really we're really kind of midway through a process of trying to figure out how to consolidate our town offices.
In the Netherlands, similar or different to the United States?
We have without question, a financial struggle these days. It's better
keeping Roe v. Wade, because I know that's a very big issue with the Supreme Court.
You have some big wind farms, but even those require a lot of people.
Outcome to this based on the Democratic and Republican proportions that we have around here.
So index it to inflation going forward.
From the state capitol, I think we understand and hear constantly from our constituents.
Question 2, expanding the beverage container deposit law.
Whenever. Yeah. If something is intriguing to me, and
I think he's going to carry on for Senator Downey, who is very
not the wealthy people. The wealthy people, they have money. They're doing investments. So I'm seeing
left, right, Republican, Democrat. Do you think this current very divisive political
very accessible?
Some different results on Tuesday, and we can move beyond this chapter in our history.
Every country in the world has had to weigh its economy versus the safety of its citizens. Where do you draw?
And welcome to our first coverage of an election live here from the LMC.
What do you think the most important local issues that were addressed in this election were? Like
All three.
All three?
Yes.
All right.
Me too.
All right.
They all interconnect, so it's the economy and the war. You stop spending $10 billion a month, you'll have some to start paying debt.
I think it'll be very interesting to see how those questions play out.
How valuable our schools are is what are our students doing after they get out? How many of our students get into two-year colleges, four-year colleges? How many of our students graduate from those two-year and four-year colleges and go on to have careers?
Ran radio ads for the first time. We didn't get the state matching funds, but we raised the highest amount of money that the Green Party's ever raised in the governor's race this election. We came so close to getting the state matching funds.
No, I want it to stay like it is.
All right.
We're safer that way. We're safer. We've gotten used to it and leave it like it is.
All right. And do you think this election is more important than past elections?
Yeah, very much so. You can tell by the people that are here. They're just swarmed with young people, and I don't think they're voting for McCain. At least my friends aren't.
Have you voted in past presidential elections?
No, this is my first one.
Nice, a first timer.
For election information, you can go to www.frontiersocialmedia.blogspot.com. And now we're here with State Representative Kulik, and Alyssa's going to ask them the first question.
I think it's clearly changing our direction and electing a new president.
And question 2 has surprisingly been yes to change the marijuana law.
Tim Hill with no votes from Sunderland. And last, for the governor votes in the town of Whately, Deval Patrick has the biggest lead out of the 4 towns with a 73% lead.
It's should the town accept the Community Preservation Act, a state law that enables the town to enact an additional. And most of the people have voted yes for that.
There were wonderful comments being made about our students, both in terms of how well prepared you were, how polite you were.
So I made this form here to allow them to upload. Once we had all the data, we could view it in this database, which basically holds all the data. McCain with 12.5%.
Sunderland has about a $7 million budget, and we had to make in real time 10%, about just south of 12%.
Consider yourself conservative, liberal, or moderate, and there's been a bunch of people that have been conservative, and that's not what I had thought at first, but.
And there's been a tremendous opportunity for them to use technology, and President hopeful Obama has been extremely effective in using the internet. So there has not been a dramatic increase in drug use, and there is, I think, a better balance in terms of the punishment fitting the crime.
Obama has promised a lot of change, and I feel like that's very important in our country right now. And it has inspired me to work harder and to follow this election much more closely.
What has inspired me to look at this election more and follow it is basically the intensity of the race, between the two candidates.
And we had a lot of fun. A lot of us, this is our first time doing this. We had a lot of students involved in the entire process.
And Obama 3. Great.
I think having students actually do this, they become part of the process. And I also visited each of the sites this morning, and the students were really, really excited because they really felt like they were a part of it.
So much work wanted to make this production happen. And I do want to thank many of the people behind the scenes. All of you guys know who you are. You deserve a great big round of applause. It's been a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful election. It's been a great party behind the scenes, all the cable connections and things. An amazing group that are back at front here. All the people in data management, Tucker, Gary, Teresa, our whole crew here. All you guys did a great, great job. What a great thing to have made history. I've had many students who have voted today for the first time. This has been a very exciting, wonderful way of showing how government works and can work for all of us.
I'm good.
Hello and welcome back to Frontier Community Access Television. We are going to be taking a look now at some of the results that are coming in from the presidential election. And we have our board turned to us now with some of the states that CNN and some other sources have been able to predict so far. We're looking at Indiana, Kentucky, West Virginia, and South Carolina being projected to go to Trump right now. Are any of these surprises to any of you?
No, not at all.
Yeah. I kind of felt the same way. And the only one that's been projected to go to Harris so far has been Vermont. And now the interesting thing, I think right now, two interesting things has been we're seeing Ohio that's leaning blue. And to be fair, I'll take all of this with a grain of salt. We're seeing the votes coming in as we're talking right now. So this could all change in a second. But we're seeing a blue Ohio right now. And North Carolina is also blue. And so I can't quite recall which way North Carolina went in the last election. I think it went red.
For Trump.
Yeah, so
very slimly.
Yeah, and so that has been labeled one of the swing states, and so that, I mean, how significant do you guys think that is?
I think a North Carolina loss for Trump is a Georgia loss too. Very similar states demographically, similar black populations, rural populations. You know, elections is a game of demographics.
Yeah.
You know, think of a North Carolina loss would be terrible, but we're only a few percentage points through counting the vote in that state, so
yeah, that's
very know.
True. Yeah, very little of the vote has been counted so far in North Carolina, but the whole deal with Ohio just made me think. I asked Representative McGovern about it in my interview with him. With the polls and Iowa, and what was happening with Iowa in the polls that came out recently, and I think that something else that could be an interesting thing to discuss with a lot of these states that are coming in as we're looking at that, some of the claims that the Trump campaign has made about election fraud and how that's going to affect the eventual results of things as they move forward in the coming days. I mean, Fenton, how are you feeling about, we talked about some possibility of violence as well, and I mean, it seems to be something that's just become, unfortunately, a norm in American politics since his election back in 2016. I mean, how much do you think that might affect some of these states?
I think it's definitely gonna affect, like, the way, not exactly the way people are voting, but the turnout mostly. I was doing exit polling at Sunderland today. There was a police officer there, and I felt very safe being there. And I'm hoping that, like, throughout the rest of America, there are police officers there and people feel safe enough to cast their vote. I think when you're looking at voter turnout, it's important. There are many different factors. Specifically, a recent one was actually weather, because the weather in a specific region is affecting the turnout. That's just a small thing you could look at. But definitely, I think violence is something that's on Americans' minds, and it's something that needs to be addressed in the future.
Yeah, and threats of violence as well. There's been numerous stories. I know we've been checking CNN and other sources as well, of stories about the election throughout the night. And most of the stories that I've seen, the headlines, have been about different threats that have been made in different areas, especially battleground states like Georgia, which right now seems to be leaning the way of Trump. But that is definitely going to be a very, CNN, I think, is going to wait a long time before they project a winner for that state.
No, I'd like to add on to that.
Absolutely.
I think whether or not, in the case of a Trump loss, I think whether if Trump says to his supporters to incite violence or not, I think whether he doesn't intervene or if he does, I think there's going to be political violence. And there's a potential for that on if he wins too. So yeah, overall, I think this election won't have a fantastic, result.
Yeah, it's definitely a very troublesome area for us to be in our democracy, as now we're getting to a very timely hour here. We're just 5 minutes away from 8 o'clock, which is when most polls are closing in the majority of states. There's looking at CNN, our main source here, most of the longest list of states and when their polls are closing is during 8 p.m. And so we'll start to see a lot of results coming in a lot of different states. Of course, more on the East Coast because of time zones and whatnot. But we're going to be seeing a lot of changes really fast, and not too many big surprises so far. I think that something that we'll definitely have to be looking out for, we said already, Georgia. That's going to be a big battleground state, and I mean they've already established that. But I think they're going to wait a very long time before they call that and before they project a winner or anything close to it. I also think the same will happen with Pennsylvania.
I think Georgia will be a much quicker than the other battleground states, because I remember hearing before the election recently that Georgia will be counting its votes much quicker than it did in 2020, and
that does make a lot of sense. Yeah.
I think by 9 p.m. we'll know who won Georgia, but I can tell you right now, I think we can pretty easily project a Trump victory in Florida.
Yes, I don't think that's too much of a surprise.
Not too much of a
people,
surprise.
yeah.
Maybe a shock to some, but
yeah, I mean definitely with snowbirds, right?
Yeah.
You know, coming down from New York, which is likely to be a blue state this year, as it has been in many years past. That's likely what we are. I mean, it's the same thing that we've been talking about on and off with Texas. Not in this election, but there's been more. It's becoming a smaller and smaller margin. In Texas, and so looking much farther down the road, not in this year, and maybe not in the next couple election cycles, but we could end up seeing something like that.
I believe in 2012 Mitt Romney carried the state by 15. In 2020, Trump carried it by 5.
Yeah,
so
it's becoming much more divisive in states like Texas and also in Florida, like we said, because of the snowbirds, but also because of specific issues that are happening there. And that are becoming more and more relevant with changing dynamics like climate change and how that's affecting the economy and everything.
Yeah, going back to Florida,
yes.
As recently as 2020, Florida was considered a great battleground state. But to see it shift to the right like this is quite interesting to see.
Yeah, it definitely, because I do remember the election, last election cycle, it could go either way,
yeah.
And
it was pretty close.
It was pretty close, and now you're saying it's going to go to Trump, and I have to say I agree with you. I think that it will, and it's not too big of a surprise for me. But I think that the biggest thing for the Harris campaign is and this was kind of established back when Trump beat Hillary Clinton in his initial election in 2016, maintaining the blue wall states, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. And that's why Wisconsin and Michigan seem to be a bit on the, still battleground states, but a bit on the safer side for Harris. She's been campaigning there, but Pennsylvania is the real, that's where that blue wall is going to be decided, right? It's going to be decided there. And I've seen all kinds of talks from different PBS News as well. I've heard this from, Pennsylvania being the crucial keystone state living up to its name.
Yes.
Yeah. And now it doesn't seem like we're having much changes in the electoral map right now. New Hampshire, and this is just coming from my own impression growing up in this area. Whenever I drove up to New Hampshire, it was a lot of, it just always seemed to me to be a very red area. And now to see it on the electoral map going blue is just, it's a little interesting to me.
And we are 5 seconds away from 8 o'clock.
5 seconds, all right, I'll get ready to reload our map on the Chromebook here. But I mean, I'm sure that nothing will be coming in quite right away, but it's sure to be something that I can't imagine that they would wait too long. It's a kind of deadline where everyone is anticipating it and looking forward to it.
Just click edit.
waiting for our maps to load here. This is a problem. And it looks like as we're having some votes come in,
One moment.
some things are changing, but the maps aren't updating. So while we wait for that to update, we're going to go to a quick break here. When we come back, we'll have some more updates about the changing dynamics of this election with the 8 o'clock deadline. You're watching Frontier Community Access Television. We have some more very interesting updates on our election map. The most interesting of which we will break down for you in just a moment, is that Texas, some results have come in. We have around 5% of the estimated vote to come in from Texas right now, and it is blue, light blue. So how are we feeling about this? What are we thinking so far? Only 5% in, but still.
You should introduce yourself.
Hello,
Yes.
my name is Killian. I was just running this out, and now I'm here to talk. And my opinion on Texas is that, well, this 5% could represent the entire state, or it could represent one very isolated 5%. There's still a chance we could have the other 95 all vote for Trump. Anything could happen. So we can't really get our hopes too high. Oh.
Yeah. I think it's pretty in line with what we've seen from Texas. The initial vote tends to be blue, but it gets more red as it goes on. I think if Florida is going to Trump by 10, I think Texas might be maybe 6, 7. I won't put a final projection on that. I'll have to see some more data, but that's how it's stacked up compared to other elections.
Yeah, I agree with you. Texas usually has the results that come in first tend to be blue, and it gets redder as the night goes on. But now we're starting to get some results in from the blue wall, or the traditional blue wall at least. Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. Wisconsin, still no votes in from them. Pennsylvania, they've got a few votes in here, 4% coming in. They're leaning blue, it says, and with very, very few votes, still not breaking 1,000 actually, is what CNN is telling us. Michigan is leaning towards Trump, but obviously very early in the night to get anywhere close to calling these states.
I do know that both candidates have been going around Pennsylvania, specifically flying between each small community in the recent days, trying to get some last-minute voters on their side.
Yeah, there's been a lot of debate about what might be the right strategy at the end of the line here for the candidates. What's going to be their closing message? And now, did any of you get to pay attention to any of their closing statements that they got to make
Yes.
some of their last rallies?
Personally, yes, I did.
Yes. So what did you think about the individual candidates' messages, Chris?
So, Kamala's final message, what she had to say, it was a lot different from what she said prior. It changed from attacking Trump to finding solutions, more so than she already did before. She spoke of policy, of course, but her final days were much more policy focused, much less Trump focused. In the Trump final message was maybe off-putting to a lot of independents. It was for Republicans. It was incredibly grandiose, incredibly large-scale, incredibly glamorous, very flashy. Yeah. It was maybe confidence, arrogance, a lot of that.
Yeah.
So that's what I see.
Yeah, and I guess the question is, that is evidently what some Republicans want to see, that kind of attitude and that energy from their party nominee, their candidate. But like you said, is that what independents want to see? Is that what the voters in these battleground states want to see? And that's, that's where you can talk about which of these closing messages is going to appeal more to which voters in which key states.
A very unique election. There are very few undecided voters.
Yeah.
Some of the least ever recently, around 2 to 3%. But that 2 to 3% is absolutely vital.
Oh yeah.
And I think the Madison Square Garden rally was great for Republicans, but I feel like independents watch that and they're kind of shell shocked.
Yeah, it definitely was. For people who don't know what the Madison Square Garden rally was, there was a lot of, and like you said, grandiose, just really high energy stuff that was going on.
It's kind of the old Trump saying of any publicity, any press is good press and good publicity.
It's a good point. Yeah, and a lot of it that a lot of Democrats and even independents are pointing to is plenty of comedians that Trump brought to the stage that ended up making some racist and other insensitive jokes and remarks on that stage. And so we have some more results coming in as well.
Drum roll.
I did see Michigan swinging back to blue, which I suppose, can be expected to a certain extent. But
you know that the one of the biggest stories coming out in the recent hours really was about Iowa.
Yes.
And their recent polling.
Yeah,
and
that's a
early
very
voting
good
data.
point.
So we're just waiting until what time again do they close?
9, I think.
Because that could be
9,
vital. It's
yes.
only 6 electoral points, which not a lot, but it could have an effect.
You know, I take the Ann Selzer poll with a little grain of salt, because for one, she refused to release the crosstabs and in the more specific parts of it. 2, there has been an influx of reliable pollsters, you know, Emerson College, since Ann Selzer, which have shown Trump up by 8, which is corresponded by other things. And Republican Party registration in Iowa has been growing very strongly. I think 4-1 on Democrats. And I don't think people are registering as a Republican to vote for Kamala Harris usually. So I wouldn't rely on a blue Iowa, but it's not totally out of the question.
To counter your point of registered voters, there has been a big wave of Republicans who have been registered for their whole lives as Republicans, deciding, you know what, I'm not going to vote for Trump this year.
Sometimes called by other Republicans, kind of McCain Republicans, as in John McCain.
Yes.
Most polls show around 10 to 15% of Republicans are not voting for Trump, and around 5% of Democrats are not voting for Kamala. And I feel like there's, as part of that 5% is, you know, some old people who back in the day voted, registered as a Democrat to vote for Jimmy Carter. They never touched that again, so they're now voting for Trump.
I think turning our attention to like the voting population itself in Iowa, I know in all of America, but specifically I saw statistics on Iowa, there's a huge gender gap. So I believe it's, I think 18%.
Really?
Something
I
like
heard
that.
1 in 8 women are voting different than their spouse.
And another interesting statistic I saw, 50% of all Gen Z people, or 50% of Gen Z lied about who they're voting for.
Really?
Yeah, they to friends, families, they all 50% lied about who they're voting for to protect themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really good testament to, you know, how divisive and divided we've become as a country with politics. And, you know, one of the reasons why this election has become so important in deciding which direction our country is going to go, and that's going to be decided in the coming weeks here, which is, I mean, it's a very daunting task for all of the people involved in the election process and the Electoral College delegates as well.
And I'd like to, on the topic of polls, I'd like to bring up the reality of polling inaccuracy, whatever way it may go this year. There is a strong chance that either candidate will be underestimated or overestimated. And I think the key indication of that is how are the first-time voters and low propensity voters going to? The person who they are going to is the person that will be underestimated. Obama was underestimated in 2012 because a lot of first-time voters who don't listen to polls or don't answer the phone for polls, they showed out for Obama. And this year you're seeing low propensity voters who are slightly more favorable to Trump than they were in 2020, but not as much as 2016.
That was one of the, I think, most underestimated candidates ever in American history across any ballots, Donald Trump.
Yeah, it was a major upset.
Pretty much no one expected his victory.
Yeah, and the other thing about all of the polls is that so many of them, because you bring up a great point, Chris, but so many of them are so close and so like deadlocked,
You know,
to where there's like, you know, you talk about the margin of error that polls have, and you hear about that a lot. Virtually all of them that you look at, you know, who is leading in whatever, you know, battleground state, they're very well within that margin of error. And so it's, that just is a testament to it. It can really go either way.
You look at the top polls, YouGov, CNN, those guys. It's a total dead heat. You're totally blind if you're looking at polling. Although I think early voting does show a different story in many places.
I think in Pennsylvania this morning I saw a poll, and it specifically showed that the difference between the two candidates was 0.3%, which is far into the margin of error,
Yes.
which is
absolutely. And now, as we move back to our election board here, we're getting Illinois on the board as well. Illinois has been a blue state pretty reliably, and they're leaning blue with a small margin of their votes coming in now. And Texas has gone back to, as we had talked about, they've leaned and swung back the other way to Trump. Nothing predicted from either of those states just yet, but we're starting to move farther out west.
Could you go back onto the Florida data? I'd like to see where we're at.
So Florida has been projected to be taken by Trump with 55% of the vote. 82% of the estimated vote is in from Florida as of right now. Harris is projected. Harris has 43% of the vote right now.
And how much does Trump lead in Florida?
In Florida, are you talking percentage points or in the votes themselves? So I think 12, I think, if I'm doing my math right in my head. Yeah.
How's the data coming in our home state of Massachusetts, I'm wondering?
Massachusetts is, well, this is the interesting thing, because it says at the bottom, estimated vote in 0%, and then you are seeing a couple thousand votes that are being counted already, so I don't know about that. But Harris is projected to win that. She has 81% of the vote right now.
Yeah.
No
surprises.
No surprise there.
I don't know
Absolutely.
anyone who didn't expect that.
Is there any data on the first district of Maine?
First district of Maine? I can look at that for you.
I believe there's also data for New York State.
Yes.
New York doesn't have any vote in as of right now, according to CNN. But I don't have any information on the individual districts for Maine, which I was hoping for that, because that's typically, I think the way that it's gone in the past is you have one vote from Maine.
The one rural district,
yes, the
second.
Yeah, that ends up going blue. That's the way it's been in the past, I believe.
Also, Nebraska is one of the two states that's divided like that.
I believe going through the Nebraskan legislature, I think by the next election it'll be winner take all in Nebraska. So, yeah.
I see a very, very light-colored Kansas on our big map up there.
Yeah, Kansas has a few votes coming in as well.
There's an interesting poll I saw out of Kansas.
Really?
Trump only led by 5. That's a state he took by like 20.
That is very interesting.
It was it was a poll done by like a Kansas research lab. 600 voters. Trump only led by 5 in Kansas. So I don't know how serious that is, but we'll have to look at that.
That is interesting. Harris right now with 7% of the vote in, according to CNN, has 52% of the vote. Trump with 46. So, I mean, still tight by all means, only 7% of the vote in, and just a couple states that are being solidly predicted a certain way. Most of them going to Trump, which are the very reliable states in the South for the Republicans.
Could we check in on that North Carolina data?
North Carolina, absolutely, because that is very interesting to me as well. 9% of the vote is in as of right now. Harris still leading 51 to 47 against Trump.
A very similar story to 2020, where Trump went on to take the state by a very slim margin. Maybe that'll return. Maybe it'll be a little higher, a little lower.
I know one thing a lot of people forget about in this, close who's going to win. It's at the end is that what time it actually is on the West Coast. I'm wondering what time is it over there? Is the sun even still up over there?
I think it's
They're 3 hours.
It's 3 hours, yeah.
So
what?
8 o'clock. So we're.
They're about 5.
They're eating dinner right now. So
yeah. And I mean, most of the states, if you're talking on the far West Coast, you look at Washington, Oregon, California, those are solid predictions to go to Harris. I mean, they've gone blue for, longer than we've been alive. So
I think Virginia right now is something I'm interested in because
that's very interesting.
It's slightly blue right now on both the maps I'm seeing, and I'd like to see where the votes are coming in, because if they're in bigger cities that traditionally lean more blue, then that could be explaining it.
Virginia, the early vote in Virginia to many Republicans seemed very promising. And I agree compared to 2020. I think Republicans will make gains in Virginia. Their governor, Glenn Youngkin, is a Republican. He has worked hard his entire gubernatorial term to elect Trump for him to win Virginia. And I think that will, in part, help him there. But I don't think he's going to win the state, although I do think he will do better. There's been an exodus of many D.C. and Maryland voters to northeastern Virginia.
Yeah, and you can see that on the election map here. We've zoomed in a little bit on the Chromebook here, and you can see in Arlington and Fairfax, just tons of deep blue over there. And as you get out into the rural areas, it gets more red.
Yeah.
50-50-ish.
And so now as we start to dive a little bit deeper into it, we're going to take a quick break to wait for some more results to come back in. But when we come back, we will dive into some more issues on the election and some more results that come in on the election map. You're watching Frontier Community Access Television. Hello and welcome back to Frontier Community Access Television. We're going to dive into some more local results now, and we're going to take a look at some Massachusetts predictions here and what we're seeing in the early voting stages. So we have our map up on the board now, and if we could zoom into Massachusetts so everyone could see what we're looking at here. Massachusetts doesn't have a lot of votes coming in from our area in the west so far. If we're looking county by county, or actually this is town by town on the map that I have here, Boston, most of the votes are coming in, but that in itself is telling enough for most of the political commentators to have a solid prediction for Massachusetts to go blue.
Definitely.
Which, you know, no surprise there. Very little of the vote coming in so far.
Could we get some numbers on the Senate race?
On the Senate race, that's a great point. Yeah, and we've been talking about the presidential election for a very long time here.
This election season has had the most, disgusting among the Senate race. I know, compared to other years, I didn't even really fully comprehend that that mattered. I just assumed it was a definite.
Yeah, and it definitely is very important. The Senate and the House, as we were talking about just a little bit before, are also up for grabs. The control of those two congressional. Okay, now we're getting some results here. So for the Senate, of course, 100 members in the Senate need over 50 to be considered to have control of it. There seems to have been a couple gains that have been made, or some of the, I'm trying to figure out the keys that they have here. There has been, I think the biggest story so far is that the Republicans have flipped a seat in West Virginia.
Wow.
Jim Justice won a Senate seat in West Virginia. We're seeing it up here now. I was not the incumbent, I assume. And so that is a big point for Republicans early in the night. And the Democrats have had a few results coming in. Warren, and so this is relevant to us. Elizabeth Warren is predicted to be the winner of the Massachusetts Senate seat. So yeah, if you're looking up there, you can see it's +1 net gain for the Republicans. They've been even so far and gained that one seat in West Virginia.
I always like to look after the fact at the counties that release their write-in information, and who people are writing in. Sometimes they're serious movements by people, and sometimes they're, well, humorous.
Yeah, it definitely, I think the write-in is an interesting thing that we have
I love it.
on the political ballot, and how, like you said, how serious some people can take it.
You know, I think just going back to the presidential election for a moment, looking at some of the voting in the states, I noticed someone who isn't running anymore is getting a substantial amount of third-party share, and it's Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Yes.
Highly contested.
He's not even running, and he's
decision.
receiving more popular vote than Jill Stein.
Yeah.
So
it's interesting. I have a couple people. I know a couple people that were supporters of him until he dropped out, and they still talk about statements that he is making recently under kind of the wing of Trump at this point.
It's anecdotal, but it's sort of not. He was very popular amongst young voters, and he was very popular in anecdote. In this school, I feel, most of my friends were supporters of him, and when the mock election happened, many were upset that he was not an option to vote for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that a big reason for that was because of the general dislike for not necessarily the individual candidates of the party. I think that there's been a big growth, and especially in younger voters, newer voters, that just not really having the best feelings towards the current dominant political parties.
Yes.
And the way that they've begun to portray themselves and compare themselves to each other. And it's caused, because of the way that they play off of each other, I think that a lot of younger people view them as being at fault for a lot of the division that's happening in America politically.
One thing I would love to poll is how many people support the Electoral College, how many people support a two-party system, and how many people want it to be, torn up and totally redone, and how many people want to reform it slowly and work with the systems we have.
Yeah, and that definitely is it's a movement that's been on the rise recently, I think. And again, me personally, I feel as though it isn't the most relevant topic to be arguing about now, especially in the election season when there's more issues that are relevant to the actual candidates.
Yeah, we're already here, so.
Yeah. In the off season, I guess you could
Definitely.
say. The off season of politics. But as we look up, we now have a map being shown to us of the previous election cycles results. And you can see, what we're looking at is a sea of red right in the middle. And that's what we talked about it a little bit before. There's so many states that are in the South and moving out, I guess you could say, kind of in the shadow of the Louisiana Purchase a little bit. If people can envision what that might look like, that would end up going red and have been going red for a very long time. And so that's why a lot of Democrats have begun to rely more on the coastal areas, which is geographically, I guess, it's just an interesting thing to look at.
Far more populated.
Far more college educated.
Yes, that also is a very good point. We were talking about the West Coast, Washington, Oregon, California, Democratic strongholds.
Could we get an update on the presidential status?
Yes,
that's what you're here for.
I'll reload the page. And we also we could take a look at the House election results as well. If we can find a place.
The House and the Senate, they're going to decide two of the biggest issues that people are really voting on, which is abortion and the border.
Yeah, that's very true.
Whoever controls the Senate and the House, they're going to really be the final. They're going to be the real deciders behind those two movements and the change behind them.
And so moving back to the presidential election here, what we're seeing right now is nothing too drastic of a change. A lot in the South staying red, Texas continuing its trajectory with 52% of the vote in now, and Trump leading 51 to 47.5 above Harris. But as we move to the east, up north, we're starting to get some more votes in Maine, and Harris has been labeled as the leader right now in Maine.
In both districts?
They don't have district details on the map that we have here, but it looks as though, they're still just a couple votes in right now. Not a large margin of course, this early in the night, you can't make calls like that, especially in something that's a little bit more complex, like Maine or Nebraska. And we still don't have any votes coming in from Nebraska yet, even though we've got neighboring votes coming in from Kansas as well.
It's 5 points. Hate to be that guy.
Well, Nevada's 6 points, and it's been labeled as a battleground state. Yeah.
One of the main combos, or not really combos, but one of the quickest victories for Harris to get the 270 and win is Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin.
Yes,
and the quickest way for Trump to get the 270 is Georgia, North Carolina, and Pennsylvania. And those both equal exactly to 270. And you'll notice that Pennsylvania is in both of those clearly showing how important it is.
Yeah, and so when you say the quickest path, I assume you're talking mathematically?
Yeah.
Speaking, so the quickest way to add up the votes.
It's got to be a big headache living in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's been so many campaign rallies that have been happening in Pennsylvania, even in the past couple of weeks.
Yeah.
It's really
Trump's
insane.
Last rally ever was in Pennsylvania, so.
Yeah, I mean, again, just a testimony to how
Even after what happened to him there?
important that state has become. And North Carolina now, as we were talking about North Carolina, it looks as though it's swinging back to Trump's side with 17% of the vote in, and Trump leading by, looks to be 2 percentage points there.
I know North Carolina has had a lot of people move there recently due to its, good urbanism, really. That's what it goes down to.
Yeah, and a lot of those urban areas, looking at the county and town maps here, it looks as though a lot of those urban areas, which can be expected, are going blue. That has been, the trend and trajectory that you can expect from all of these elections. But even, I think the big thing is you see around the Capitol, if you go north of the Capitol here, I think you guys can see kind of where I'm pointing here.
Yeah.
The counties north of the Capitol, those are going blue.
Suburban areas.
Suburban areas. And I think that's, you can talk about the demographics like you were before, Chris, and how important that is into the actual results and where people are going to be voting.
I'm sure we'll see some New York data very soon.
Yeah.
Within a few minutes, I believe. So that'll be interesting to see.
We can guess it's going to be blue.
Yeah, I think that New York is a pretty safe bet for blue.
One of the bluest in the country.
Yes, by a pretty long shot, I think, actually.
Yeah.
We've mentioned many anomalies like Ohio, Pennsylvania, Iowa. We haven't mentioned Alaska yet.
Alaska, their polls, well, this is actually,
Alaska is trending left. Trending Democratic.
And they're the last state to have their polls closed. By Eastern time,
12.
they close at 1 a.m. And
Hawaii
so we'll know.
I have school tomorrow.
Yeah.
Maybe by tomorrow.
Yeah, hopefully. But things seem to be holding steady right now for a lot of the states. They've seemed to even out a little bit because you see a lot of...
No surprises.
No surprises. We saw Texas go blue earlier in the night and then come back to red the way that...
Kansas went red.
Yes, and that's the way that it typically has gone in the past. And so no big surprises so far. Pennsylvania holding blue, it looks like, for Harris. Only 11% of the vote in, but a very big lead. 70% to 30% in favor of Harris.
That's due to counting the early vote first, and then they count the in-person vote.
Yeah, and a lot of the votes that are coming in are in the city and urban areas.
True.
So a lot of those coming like Philadelphia, Harrisburg, Pittsburgh, and you go farther west, Erie. Those are the places where most of the votes have been counted, it seems.
It's not a surprise that Trump won Florida, but I think the margin in which he won was very large.
Very good point. Yeah.
Very large swing to the right compared to 2016 and then 2020.
Yeah. Georgia's going to be a big, it's probably in the back of a lot of people's minds due to their new law that the write-in, the early votings are going to be counted last. So people who voted by mail, that's going to be the last thing counted.
I think I won't put money on it, but I think Georgia is not safe for Trump, of course, but I think it's the most favorable of the swing states to him. Republicans won the early vote, and I'm sure they will win the in-person vote too, which is what they usually do. So I think that will be a state which Trump will carry of the battlegrounds, the most likely to be for him.
Yeah, and something that we haven't really talked about as much, mostly because it's on the West Coast, is Arizona. Yes, in Arizona, there's a lot of interesting things going on there. And I've seen predictions both ways, some pretty even polling as well. What have you guys heard about Arizona coming into tonight, and any thoughts on that?
Well, as the race went on, the polls leaned more to one side, and so did the early voting data, and the side was Trump. I think that it will be a slim flip from 2020, personally, from Biden to Trump, but from Kamala to Trump. I think that's a state, the second most likely swing state to go for Trump next to Georgia. It's more fundamentally conservative than Michigan, of course, than Wisconsin.
Sure.
Maybe more than Pennsylvania. And I think states don't exist in a vacuum. And I think that if Trump does well in Arizona, it will slim the margin in Nevada. Similar demographic states. I don't think he will win Nevada, but I think it will slim the margin in a state like Nevada.
Yeah. And what kind of effect does the slimming of a margin have on the, grander scheme of things? In a system where we have it's a winner-take-all system.
Yes.
What significance does that have? I mean, hypothetically, he wins this. He's not running again.
True.
He can't. And so, what significance does that have?
Popular vote, I guess.
But what significance does the popular vote have if we've had 5 elections now in American history where the candidate with the popular vote has not won the Electoral College?
I feel like if Trump won this election but he didn't win the popular vote, that'd be a massive blow to his, I guess, his personality, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a very good point. He's worked himself up to be something.
He's done rallies in California, in New York, and the only reason he could be doing that is to win the popular vote. He wants more turnout in deep blue states, so he can win the popular vote.
Yeah.
His motivation is to win.
Yes.
That's been his whole life.
Win, fueled by, I don't know.
Maybe we can get the rest of that thought in a little bit. What thoughts are you having right now in Arizona, Fenton?
I haven't really heard much about Arizona. I haven't really heard about it. I mostly have looked at Pennsylvania, a little bit Wisconsin, Michigan, and North Carolina.
Yeah, I think that all of us here have been focusing a little bit more on the East Coast, especially just because of
Definitely.
geographically where we are.
Mm-hmm.
And time zones.
Yeah, definitely
More
in time
electoral votes on
zones.
the east and the west.
Yeah, that's true. And I'm trying to look and see. I'll reload the page here to see if there's any changes.
Drum rolls.
For the presidential results.
It looks like Illinois and New Jersey, Harris is the projected winner there on the first map. Yeah.
It looks like it.
You already have those down.
Yeah, New Jersey, not too much of a surprise there. Still, nothing too surprising from any of the candidates so far. Things seem to be going the way that a lot of people have predicted. Georgia, like we said, with the new law that I think it was Killian who was talking about it with the early votes, things could change late in the night potentially through that. You never really know. And the same goes with Pennsylvania. That's just,
And I have a feeling that all of the president will not be called maybe Wednesday, Thursday, possibly Friday.
Yeah.
I feel by 11 p.m. tonight we will have a feel for who will be elected.
Yeah. I think that things will be set in stone, confirmed in a couple days, with the finalization of the actual counting of the ballots themselves. But I agree with you, Chris. I think that we can get a good idea of who will be the next president by roughly midnight, I'd say, if we're pushing it a little late. And now, of course, we see Maine swinging back to the red. And I mean, that I don't think much of that considering the way that it's gone in the past, especially with the congressional districts.
The least blue of the deep blue states.
It's definitely the demographic of Maine, a lot of the way that they think about I have a decent amount of family that is from Maine, actually, and so there's a lot of interesting worldviews that can happen up there, especially with some influx of Canadians as well. Not a large amount, I don't think enough to really spark a long discussion.
How about that?
There's a lot of big fan of third-party candidates.
That's very true. Yes.
And if a candidate doesn't receive 50% of the vote in Maine, there will be ranked choice voting.
Yeah.
So.
That's what makes Maine very interesting on the national scale, I think. But like we said, everything's seeming to be sticking to the script that most people had prepared for this election. Still waiting for results to come in from New York, which we can predict with relative certainty. But Wisconsin, I think, is one that we'll be looking for. Not too late in the night. That'll be coming in soon, I'm pretty sure.
Yes.
This right-wing swing here we see, that's Republican swing, is not counting California, which will definitely help the Democrats.
And New York.
Yeah,
California, New York.
California and New York will be
the two
big
biggest
gains.
point bringers that are traditionally Democratic.
Together, 82 electoral votes. Which
And so,
wowzers.
Tyler, if we could, on the electoral map, just for the sake of it, put New York and California to the Democrats, just so we can see the number totals of what that would be, because right now we're seeing something a little skewed.
Now it's a little more even, and we can get an idea of what to look for.
I feel like that's a little bit closer to the reality of we might expect with those two states being very deep strongholds for the Democrats, and especially early in the night, having certain states coming in before others and whatnot. But now as we wrap things up, we'll just go down the line, start with Killian. Any final thoughts going into this very pivotal election night?
Well, I think a lot of Americans will have trouble sleeping tonight with all these ideas and worries and excitements going through their heads. And, well, we really can't know. That's the moral of what I've been saying. It's hard to know.
And I think at this point, we have no clue who's going to be elected. This is, it's showed us how it's gone, but it won't show us who will win. Very, very blind for both sides. Very, I think we're a little too early in the night to make any final predictions here, but
absolutely,
I think it will be a very pivotal election.
And I think as the night goes on, I will especially be looking at Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. Another thing I'd just like to see the votes that come in there, but specifically Pennsylvania is my main thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with all of that, and especially with as the votes are being counted in what the campaigns might have to say about certain allegations that might come out about. Because I mean, I'm sure there will be recounts in the coming days and certain challenges from various groups and whatnot. And we talked about the violence a little bit, but the best we can hope for is some kind of peaceful transition, because we will be seeing a new administration.
No matter what.
No matter what. And that is, if you're looking for some kind of change in politics, you'll be getting it at the very least. That's the least we can promise you.
Can I say one more thing?
Absolutely.
I just gotta say again, I'm not a political expert. My highest level of education in this subject is 8th grade civic. So, don't listen to me.
But as we close out our stream here with, just about as good of a cliffhanger as you could ask for. The results and the votes will keep coming in, and stay glued to your television sets, I guess. That's what we're going to do as soon as we get home. So thank you all very much for tuning in tonight. I've been your host, Mason Smith, with Finton, Chris, Killian, Kevin Murphy, and Tyler Wolkowitz. Great crew we have behind the cameras here. So thank you all very much for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed our special coverage of Election Night 2024. You've been watching Frontier Community Access Television. Good night.
The one question we have in Whately that's about is not an official ballot question. This other person.
Without question, financial struggle. We have some big farms, but even those require a lot of people.
I think we're all very accessible, and it's really important for me as an elected official